Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. It's Lisa here with the XTRAcredits All-Star, and I have René with me today. I'm so excited. So René owns a company called Charlie Bravo Aviation, and she is a force to be reckoned with. She is one of the 4 to 6% of women in aviation who holds a leadership position. And so I'm excited to have her here today. Welcome, René.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so honored to be on the show today, and I'm just thrilled to talk with you a little bit more about being a woman in a male-dominated industry. And honestly, my passion is really about helping those companies that want more women, or those industries that want to encourage women to come on board to flourish in that area, because there are all sorts of solutions out there to be had, and they involve men and women.
Yes, they absolutely do. So I'm having some technical difficulties here. I'm trying to get the screen to split so that we're both here. Okay, just a second here. Eventually I will get it. Shift, click. Shift, click. There we are. Excellent. Gotta love technology. We were just having this conversation and hate it at the same time if it doesn't work properly.
It's amazing and terrifying.
It is. So you own Charlie Bravo Aviation with your husband. Your daughter Brooke just recently got her pilot's license. Your son is the VP, and you have a brand new baby on the way for a grandchild. You've got a lot of things going on.
Thankfully, it's not me having a baby on the way. It's my daughter-in-law and son having a baby on the way. I'm very excited about that. It'll be in the end of January.
Excellent. And you're just starting you have one book out that you've co-written with Lisa Copeland called Crushing Mediocrity, and you have another book on its way in January. Let's talk a little bit about that launch of that new book.
I do. The new book I'm really excited about. It's called Stand Up: How to Flourish When the Odds Are Stacked Against You. And I went back and forth with the publisher on this. I mean, we had a wrestling match about talking about what enabled me to flourish in a male-dominated industry, about what's enabled me to flourish working with my husband, which has its own set of challenges, and what enabled me to flourish even though I dropped out of college pregnant and was a stay-at-home mom for years, and then came back into the workforce when my kids were teenagers. So all of those things are things that can cause you not to flourish, to be held back. And it's really a story, or a number of stories, about the things that I've had to overcome and how I've done that. And I'm like, people don't want to read about me. And she's like, yes, they do. So there it is. That's what Stand Up is all about. And I'm really excited to have it come out in January on Kindle, and then in April in the bookstores.
Fantastic. And part of your story really is tell me a little bit more, because I want to know more about your story. As far as you went from in college to become a journalist, you dreamed as a child of being a journalist, to dropping out of college, to raising your family, to becoming this highly successful CEO. How do you go from being a stay-home mom to being a CEO and co-founder of this amazing company to, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales on private airplanes? Like, how does that happen? How do you go from, you're in an industry all of a sudden, in the aviation industry? Like, was that a passion of yours that you ended up, or did you find a gap in the market? How did that all occur?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, it's one day and one step at a time. Just keep moving forward no matter what the discouragements or the setbacks are.
Yep.
So that's the short answer. But how I got into the industry, my husband's father was a corporate pilot, and Kurt, my husband, sold advertising for an aviation publication.
Okay.
And eventually he got into this position where he was meeting these guys who bought and sold private planes. And as any of you know who are in sales, there's a lot of bump and cut that goes on. You know, you hit a ceiling. If you're not going to move into management, you can't grow anymore, and you can't increase your compensation anymore unless you start selling heavy equipment or real estate or technology, software as a service kind of thing. So it's really hard to keep growing financially.
Yeah.
So Kurt decided, with his dad's history and some of the guys that he knew, that he wanted to sell planes. So we moved from Washington, D.C. to Georgetown, Texas, which is a suburb of Austin.
That's quite the leap. That's a long ways. That's just two different worlds.
Big culture shift there.
Yeah, no doubt.
6 types of livestock between me and the closest Starbucks. It was a culture shock. But we fell in love with Texas. We fell in love with this industry. Yeah. And 6 years after he started with another company, I was doing a little bit of their marketing, freelance, and we decided to start our own company 10 years ago. And then it was a complete adventure how I ended up in the leadership role, and that's because of a spy ship that we bought for Lockheed Martin. So interesting. It's been an interesting journey, not necessarily one that I would have chosen, but some of the vistas and some of the opportunities have been amazing on this walk through life.
All right, everybody's going to want to know. I'm dying to know, what's the biggest celebrity that you ever sold a plane to?
I might not be able to tell you.
Oh, okay. Somebody we know. Okay, so how about a politician?
Okay.
Like,
who
could you?
We'll do this. So I have a plane for sale right now.
Yeah.
That was a NetJets plane. And if you go back through and look at the history of this NetJets plane, Julia Roberts owned a share of it.
Oh, cool.
So I particularly like that one. We did work on a deal with George Strait eons and eons ago. When I did helicopter shuttle for the first Formula One race here, I had Patrick Dempsey as a client. I had Mario Andretti as a client. I had Blake, the founder of Tom's Shoes, as a client.
Yep.
Did I mention McDreamy? Patrick Dempsey was awesome. Oh my gosh, what a nice guy.
So he is
I had
nice.
Bob Bondurant. So lots of the kind of racing world was my client that particular weekend. And we've done some fun stuff, flown some drivers around, and worked with just super interesting people. My first sale was to Time Warner Cable. So, and of course that pilot has flown everybody who's anybody around. Yeah. So you get lots of interesting stories, whether you actually talk to the people or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now you're running this company. You're shuttling all these movie stars around. You're extremely successful. You sit on a board for women in aviation, and you help women rise and stand up. And you have a movement that you're working on right now that you really are passionate about. And you have a Facebook group for mentoring. And so if there's ladies out there right now, or husbands who would love to give their wives a wonderful gift of confidence and standing up, you have a Facebook group. Let's talk a little bit more about that mentorship program and what that looks like.
Well, there are a couple of reasons for this. I started a podcast about 3 months ago talking about helping companies empower women. And the thing that I hear over and over and over again from companies and their executives, male and female, is that women need role models and women need mentors. They need champions. And, you know, it's great if there are men who are champions of women coming up through the ranks of companies or within industries, but sometimes women need women to talk to bounce ideas off of, to figure out how to communicate in a more effective manner. And so I'm passionate about that, and I think that it's very needed. And then I got kind of convicted because I would have people ask me if I could mentor them, and I would be like, no, sorry, I can't mentor you because I have a book coming out and I'm running a company. And like those beliefs and those passions are in conflict with one another. And I really don't have time to mentor people one-on-one, but I finally came up with an idea. What if I could disperse some wisdom about how to stand up and how to stand out, and then have a community built around that where people can help one another and encourage one another. And I'm one to many instead of one to one, because then I could really do it as a gift back to the community. And so I do charge a nominal fee for that, not the $10,000 or $12,000 that I pay myself a year for business coaching, but it's something that I can do to help women stand up and stand out in whatever field they're in and whatever place they are in their life. Well, so I'm sure you can tell by my rambling that I'm excited about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's really important, and kudos to you, René, because it's important to have a safe environment where women are comfortable to talk about things. Because let's face it, we look different, we act different, and we think different than men. And so having a group like you have with your expertise and your wisdom is really important, and for other women to share, not just with you, but also with each other.
Yeah, I think it is important. And I will say this, there are a couple of guys in the group that are interested in helping in helping the cause and in growing in their own communication skills. So I know a couple of them are really passionate about helping women. And so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, very much. Well, that's exciting. Well, good for the men. Good for the men for standing up.
Right? Who am I to discriminate? Because I've been discriminated against, and I don't want to do that. So that's where it is right now.
Good. And so if you were to give, people are always asking you for advice. Obviously, this is the reason, this was your solution to that problem for mentorship. So if you were to give ladies today one piece of the most valuable life from an experience that you've had, and share that experience with us, what would it be?
The number one piece of advice that I give all of the time to college age women, to older women, to men who are trying to help in any situation is be authentic. I'll share a story about that. And I actually did a demonstration of this. I wasn't prepared to do this today, or I would have done it again. But, I think being authentic is really important. And earlier this year, this is how fresh this is for me. I was at a conference, and my industry is very male dominated, and my role is even more male dominated than my industry. But I was at a conference, and I was standing around with some of the guys that I'm friendly with, and it crossed my mind that I was trying to fit in with the guys. And I did a quick shift. That was in the opening cocktail party. I did a quick shift. And the rest of the time I was at this conference and I was in London, I sought out women the whole time. Like, hey, I don't know you. I'd like to meet you. What do you do in the industry? How can I help you? And that was the most meaningful conference that I've been to. And because I was doing that, I had male leaders of other companies approaching me saying, hey, I really like that you're doing this. I really like what you stand for, and I want to be part of the solution too. And so that was a big eye-opening thing for me. But then do you want my more personal example?
Yes, of course.
Okay, you may have seen this because I did this on Facebook the other day. So you may not realize it by listening to me now, but I am introverted and I am shy. And in the past, I have been painfully shy. Like when I was much, much younger, terrified, I would leave parties crying because nobody talked to me. When I was in my early 20s, just like, why does nobody want to talk to me? Well, I didn't realize that I have to initiate conversations to talk to people. Like I was part of the problem. And so as I started growing, I started getting over that. And then I had a good friend who happens to be the co-author of my last book, Lisa Copeland, who's incredibly gregarious. You know, Lisa, she's very outgoing. She's not afraid of anything. And Lisa was putting on a charity fashion show, and she wanted me to be a model in the fashion show. She's like, you're thin, you're tall, you're going to be a model. I'm like, I'm going to fall off the stage. I'm going to trip over my feet. No way, can't do it. She's like, René, you're going to do it. If you're my friend, you're doing this for me. And I was petrified. And we're backstage. I'm like, Lisa, I'm going to throw up on the audience. I cannot do this. And she's like, come here. She like grabbed me by the back of my head and snapped a clip-in ponytail in my hair and said, now you got Texas big hair. Get out there and work that updo. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I walked out there. I walked down the catwalk. I did my little turn. I walked back. I didn't throw up. Nobody booed me off stage. And I realized that we can do things to encourage one another, and we can do things to give ourselves a confidence boost. But what I realized that day wasn't that I needed fake hair to be able to do something. It was that I needed someone to believe in me. Yeah. I needed someone to believe in me enough to say, stand up, get out there and do it. Yeah. And so that's really my dream. And that would be my encouragement to other people who are listening to this, just to be able to say, encourage those people around you. When you see gifts in people, encourage them to use them. Yes. Because I wouldn't be sitting here today if she hadn't done that for me. And it wasn't just her. It was lots of other people who have believed in me and encouraged me over the years. And I think we all need to do that for one another. You've certainly done that for me over the last couple of weeks. I've appreciated all of your encouragement.
Oh, thank you. You know what? I think lots of times, René, thank you for sharing that with me, because I think people forget you're beautiful on the outside, but you're still scared like everybody else. We all have our own fears. And we need encouragement just as much as anybody else does. And so that's a great story of how you got over being, and I'm sure you still fall back on. I know for myself, when I first started out in business, I hated going to networking events. Absolutely hated. In fact, I'd have sweat underneath my armpits. I'd be just sick. Having to walk into a room where I knew nobody and try to strike a conversation with somebody was absolutely appalling to me, until, like you, I met somebody who said, you know what? And I use this all the time, actually. Everybody in that room goes to the toilet the same as you. So don't think of them as being anybody else but just another person, and have a conversation. People love to talk about themselves. And so ask them a question about themselves and they'll ramble on and on and on. And so the next time I went to a networking event, that's exactly what I did. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, it's not really about me. It's about them and the relationship that you build. And you just slowly get over that. So as you did.
Right. It's networking events. Sometimes I love them and sometimes I hate them, but always. I mean, the same thing works in sales. It's not just in networking. If you can get people talking about themselves, if you can approach them with the how can I help you kind of demeanor about you, they end up giving it back. Yeah. I mean, if you try to gain things from other people without giving them something in advance, then that makes a little bit more difficult relationship.
It does. And you know what? It's okay to be vulnerable. I think that's the other big thing in business, is that as women, we always try to protect, or at least I do anyways, I can't speak for you, but you always try to protect yourself and you don't want anybody to see your vulnerabilities. But your vulnerabilities is sometimes your biggest power.
Right. And, I had a conversation with someone about this morning, because I work very often with very egotistical people, very high profile people, and they're very expensive attorneys. And I do that. I close deals in 42 different countries. Yeah. So it's not just the egos and the attorneys and the high-powered finance, CFOs or comptrollers, it's different cultures.
Yeah.
And different acceptances of women being in the room and being at the table. And so I often need to put myself in a power position. And so I'm not vulnerable in sales and closing environments, but I can be kind.
Yeah.
And so even if I'm not going to be vulnerable in a way that I expose a weakness in myself, because that's not necessarily a good idea when you're negotiating multi-million-dollar deals. But if I'm kind, it makes a big impact. Asking someone, your voice sounds strained today. Are you having a good day? Did you have a nice weekend? Did you get good sleep? Have you been able to enjoy the sunshine in your country or your state? Just being kind and considerate goes a long way when it's not in your best interest to be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, as women, we tend to be more in tune to some of those realities while we're negotiating, while we're doing sales, and while we're in business. And you're right. It's vulnerability obviously has its place, and it's not in the negotiation of the $100 million deal. But kindness really is a great way to react in those situations. But more importantly, I think women, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we tend to be more in tune to those situations as well and be able to react in those environments.
I think I agree with you. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves to do that, because when we work in a very male-dominated industry, we tend to take on male communication styles.
Yes,
and
we do.
I remember one of my friends was we did an all-female event earlier this year. There were a couple men there, but it was a women's leadership forum. And one of my friends in the industry was like, I don't even know how to network at this thing, Renee. She's like, I talk to dudes all the time. Like, how do I talk to chicks?
Yeah.
I'm like, Robin, all of us talk to dudes all the time. Talk to the chicks like you talk to dudes. It's going to be okay. Okay. But I think sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to talk one way or another depending on the situation. And I think that really helps. And I think women are really good at adapting to that.
I think so too. And I would 100% agree with you. My business coach tells me all the time, don't forget, Lisa, you are a DI personality, but you have to add a little S in there every now and then.
Yep, absolutely.
So I would imagine that you're very dedicated to professional development and to continuing education, and that you carve out time in your week, maybe not in your day, because I know you're a very busy woman traveling around and dealing with all these different countries and clients. But how do you skill up? What type of learning do you seek out on a regular basis to help you, get to that next level and that next level of your career and your development?
So I, for the last few years, have had a business coach, and his name is Michael Hyatt. Mm-hmm. He was the CEO of a big publishing company, and he's a business blogger. And I first was attracted to him because I was writing and he was a publisher. So I wanted to hear what he had to say. And then as I began listening more and more, I started following his Best Year Ever curriculum. And then he started putting out some productivity work. And I actually, I use his planner pretty religiously, and it really does help me. But he also does some other kind of best business practices coaching. And so I go once a quarter, and it's in a group mentoring situation with Michael, and that helps. And then inside of that group that I'm a part of, we all spur one another on with different things to research. I have a podcast, but I'm not a huge podcast listener. I love to read. So I read books. I subscribe to Blinkist, which gives me like a 15-minute synopsis of books. And from that, I'll be able to say, oh, I should really read Brene Brown's Dare to Lead book. That could be really interesting. So I love to read. And then I ask people questions. So I get to meet with people who have businesses successful enough to own planes.
Yep.
And, we have a lot of small, mid-sized business owners as clients. And so, the journalist in me comes out and I ask questions about how do you do that? And, well, how do you position your company to sell it to PayPal or whatever else? I'm innately curious.
Yeah.
And so ask questions. So formal training.
I think that's important.
Reading and asking questions.
Yeah, like asking questions. So I just actually did a video on this about asking questions and how that really creates a learning environment. And people so often when they're in situations, networking events or what have you, often want to sound intelligent and they want to sound resourceful. And they forget that by asking questions that you don't know the answers to, you really create a learning opportunity. And that's really where lots of business comes from, because you begin to recognize other gaps in the market or ways that you can serve somebody else.
Right.
And so that's really important. And learning is, in the top 4% of the world. If you look at anybody who is extremely successful, they are avid learners, whether it is reading a book or being part of a mentor group or coaching or what have you. So your stand-up challenge is a great opportunity for people to learn, obviously, from you. But you have a BOGO going on for the stand-up challenge, correct?
I do. It's through November 8th. Are we live?
We are live, yep.
Okay, so it's through tomorrow. I'm actually launching the first lesson tomorrow. So the first challenge comes out tomorrow. So through the end of the day, November 8th, buy one, get one for 6 months. So if you and it's super cheap for what I'm offering here because I want everyone to be able to afford it and not make excuses. So $30 a month. And then if you want to bring a sister, a coworker, your aunt, a college student who goes to your church along, buy one, get one, they'll be in for 6 months without paying. And so I think that it's always more fun when you do it with a friend or someone else that you can compare notes with.
Absolutely. And that's on Facebook, right? They'll find you on Facebook. So
they can find me on Facebook and the information is on there. My website is renebanglesdorf.com. You'll have to spell that out for everyone, I guess, because it's a long last name. But that is a place that you can find me and sign up as well.
Excellent. Good. Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to end the show. So you have 10 tried and true principles that make people become extraordinary, correct? Right.
We did, I think we outlined those in Crushing Mediocrity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the number one tried and true principle that we can leave with today is?
Knowing your underlying purpose. Okay. It's the first chapter in the book. It really talks about where your passion and your proficiency or your skill set collide, and then filtering everything that you choose to do through that. So I may be really passionate about flying, but I'm not good at it. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to try to teach flying lessons. Right? So if we take what we're passionate about and what we're good at, and we put those together, and then we decide to do or not to do activities based on where those two things intersect, then we get really honed in at what in our life is going to make a difference in other people's lives.
Excellent. That's great advice. Great advice. Thank you very much, René, for joining me today. And I've put your email or your website on the video as well, so people can get a hold of you there. And enjoy your passion, and thank you for standing up for us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on today, Lisa. I appreciate you.
Take care.